Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. In our ongoing informal legacy series to help BronxNet celebrate its 30th anniversary, tonight we take a look at Bronx environmental infrastructure that's been with us not only for the last 3 decades, but for hundreds of thousands of years. I'm talking about 2 of the borough's literal landmarks that are so important to our peace and tranquility and the sustainability of life in the Bronx River and Wave Hill. So let's meet their chief caretakers, the Interim Executive Director of the Bronx River Alliance, Elena Conte. Nice to have you with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
And the recently appointed President and Executive Director of Wave Hill, it is Ray Oladapo-Johnson. Mr. Oladapo-Johnson, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It occurred to me, with everything going on, certainly we know what's going on in Israel, and we know what's going on in the American courts, and we know what's going on in our city and the economy and politics, and goodness gracious, and we deal with all of that on the show. As I was preparing for this show, I said, well, this is a relief. And then I realized that's exactly what the Bronx River and Wave Hill are all about for all of us, a little breath of fresh air, and that's what we'll talk about. But first, so you're relatively new at the Bronx River Alliance, or really new, just a couple of months.
That's right.
Just tell me what it's been like, going from where you are now.
Sure.
I should mention Elena Conte was on our program when she was at Pratt Institute 10 years ago.
Something like 10 years ago.
But she's back now. So go ahead, tell me just about you and about where you've been and now what this is like.
Sure. Thanks so much, Gary. I really appreciate that. Actually, I have about a 20-year history in the area. So coming back to the Bronx River corridor, right, and to the Bronx River Alliance is kind of like a dream come true, because so many of those relationships, based in the environmental justice movement when I first started working in Hunts Point, not too long after the organization was founded, and then later worked a long time, also in the area in partnership. It's been a thrill to be so close with community and with such an incredible staff and representing such a beautiful legacy.
And of course, we would be remiss if we didn't mention that the borough was named for the Bronx River. People don't know that. People just say, well, we were going to visit the Bronx, but no, it was the Bronx River. That's a whole other thing. When you look at that river that runs through our veins, literally, what are the things that you say, well, we've done well, but we want to do better?
Oh my goodness. Well,
in 25 words.
We've done so many things well. And when I say we, I'm talking really about the Bronx community,
yes,
right? Going back to the 70s, right? And our organization, formed in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so just from like a material perspective, right? We've taken a lot of bad stuff out of the river, and we've planted a lot of good stuff, and we continue to remove invasives and care for it, right? So 30,000 tires have been removed, for example.
30,000 tires. And then there are cars driving the streets without tires.
But in terms of what still needs to be done, there's so very much, right?
Is maintenance the biggest thing, right? In other words, you cleaned it. It doesn't stay clean. There's too many industries around. We know that. Is that really the big thing? And then we want to get to Mr. Oladapo-Johnson.
Maintenance is a huge issue, for sure. But nowadays it's not necessarily industry, right? But it is stormwater runoff, right? And combined sewer overflows. So with new development, if it doesn't meet the highest green standards, to prevent that, right? We will have things that
can
harm
also
the
talk
water
about the
quality.
effects of climate
Yeah.
change and all those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Oladapo-Johnson, I was fascinated to learn, and we just discussed it briefly beforehand, that you work for the Wildlife Conservation Society, the Bronx Zoo, and the High Line before that. How did those positions inform what you do now and bring you to a point where, okay, now I have Wave Hill?
Well, first of all, we share the river, which
Yes.
is really good.
Good point.
You know, the Bronx Zoo it's a fascinating space because it's a public space.
Mm-hmm.
So I think my time at WCS was really beginning to understand how do you open the space up to the public? How do you encourage the message of conservation to people? A lot of kids coming on a free Wednesday may never have seen the Siberian tiger or gone into
You can put me on that list.
yeah, I've gone into Congo and seen, a gorilla, or, gone to either Madagascar exhibit and seen ring-tailed lemurs. And a lot of my work there was balancing that message of conservation with also managing 365 acres of parkland and oldwood forest. I had to balance that.
A little larger than Wave Hill,
Yeah, larger than Wave Hill, yeah.
to say the least. And then what about the High Line? That's an interesting concept as parkland, so to speak, because it's really all about the public walking. What was instructive there?
Well, before the Highland came a 7-year stint in Boston.
Oh, you
This
mentioned
was
that, yes.
actually really important because I went to work on a park system called the Emerald Necklace, which is a linear park system that runs from the Back Bay Fens to Dorchester. It was designed by the same guy that designed Central Park, Frederick Law Olmsted.
Yeah.
Olmsted is the father of landscape architecture, and he really believed in democratic space. People need to have open space, and it should be democratic across the board. Central Park, Prospect Park, a whole bunch of parks around the nation. So I really began to understand, I lived this guy's life. I got inside his head. I was
Right.
working on his parks.
What is fascinating to me is the notion of inclusion, because so the park, you have the park and everybody's invited, you have the river and everybody can enjoy it, but it's a specific point for both of you to be inclusive. How do you play that in the activities and the other things you do at Wave?
Well, inclusion is everything. It's essentially.
It's everything.
Yeah. It spans.
So relieving to hear you say that.
It spans, socioeconomic issues. It spans, your capacity as a human being to climb a set of stairs or go down some stairs or visit a certain part of our garden. So making sure that everybody, and I mean everybody, can actually enjoy the space is one of my key objectives.
And it comes out in the programming. I mean, we're going to talk about all that. I do want to go a little bit into history.
Sure.
One of the things that I learned about originally when BronxNet started and we started doing BronxTalk was the concrete plant park and this kind of ugly thing that was right next to our river for what we're named of. We're going to show a little before and after. Talk about Concrete Plant Park and why getting that square was so important to the Bronx River Alliance.
Sure.
And we have the pictures of that.
Yeah, so as groups came together, right, and coalesced, forming the Alliance, they had a vision for a continuous pathway of parks, greenways, right, all along the river, so that issue of inclusion, of access could be made real, right?
And let's just say people can see on the left, that's what it was. And, I mean, those structures are still there, but they're cleaner and there's green around it. Just talk about the work.
Absolutely. And it's been completely designed for public access. And right now, I don't know if you know, but it is home to the Foodway, which is the only edible forest in a New York City park. And it is one of our most active programming sites where all types of incredible things are grown there and people can connect to.
Name three. Three of the all kinds.
Well, we had peaches and we had cherries and we have some herbs that I continue to learn about through our
Okay.
resident herbalist artist.
Fair enough.
Yes.
And what the work that went into it was volunteers, was funding that came from elsewhere. I mean, tell us how we did that transfer.
I mean-
and then we're going to look at Starlight Park in a moment.
Yeah, so Concrete Plant Park came online in 2009 as a formalized park, but before that it was reclaimed. People took it over, right? And they started programming there and creating access to the river. And then we fundraised together, right? And we got it designed and we got it improved and it became a park.
As good a Bronx story as you can have. I mean that because and then of course the beavers arrived.
Yeah.
You were saying that the beavers have now swam up to the Bronx Zoo in that area, and that was an indication that there was real or relative health in the Bronx River.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of species coming back. We've got more than 24 fish, of course, Jose Beaver and Justin Beaver. Folks, I think know that in January we had dolphins coming from the estuary, and so this is the year of the dolphin. They did get a little bit lost, but they didn't get harmed.
They had the sunfish, right? There was sunfish that had popped up in the Bronx River.
There is no limit.
Let's just a quick look at Starlight Park, and then we're going to talk at some of the things that have gone on at Wave Hill. So this is the same kind of thing, is that, look at the difference, folks.
Right.
I mean,
so this is reclaiming brownfields, right, and creating a connection. So after 20 years of advocacy, this year, a $41 million investment opened in April, closing a gap. You can now go from Hunts Point and Garrison Park all the way up to 177th Street, walking, running, biking, and just enjoying right on the river.
Amazing. It's just a beautiful thing. So let's talk about Wave Hill in the same way. Wave Hill is an urban oasis. You didn't invent the view over the Hudson, although you have beautiful views. What does it take the artistry of the legacy of the gardens and landscapes? We're going to show just a bunch of them, but just talk a little bit, talk glowingly, if you will, because so many people say to me, I'm coming to New York and I'm going to make sure to go to Wave Hill. What does it take to keep it as it is?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, I'll say it takes a remarkable team of people that I'm lucky enough to work with, from a facilities squad to a horticulturist who really understand the legacy of this space historically. We're still lucky enough to have one of our founding horticulturists, Marco Polo Stefano, live nearby and have a working relationship with him. He can walk the ground and say, I planted that tree in 1972, and look at it now. And, having that is also essential to us. But also...
Let me just interject. That must be a joy for somebody coming in new to say, well, okay, I have these are the resources, the personnel I have. And here's somebody who says, look, this is what we've done. And over time.
Over decades.
Decades, yeah.
And that's important, but also, making sure that the space is equitable, that we serve
There's
as...
that word again, yeah.
Equitable. Yeah, it's an important word. It's essential. Making sure that we remain that oasis, a very special, quiet place where you can come and seek refuge from anything.
You talked about staff, and we're going to get back to Ms. Conte about volunteers and all those kinds of things. How large is staff? And really, I don't know how you can describe it. What does it take to maintain it in the beauty that it is? I mean, a garden in front of somebody's house gets littered on, let alone a public garden. What does it take to do all that?
To answer your first question, we have approximately 70 people.
70 people
on staff. And what does it take? It takes passion. It takes being really passionate about this space. It takes dedication. I'm driving out yesterday and I see a Coke bottle on the floor. I stop my car, get out, pick it up, put it in my car.
That's because you couldn't stand to see it there.
Yeah, so we're all like that. We all have this dedication to making sure the space is what we want people to come and enjoy.
And you have, let's see, the John Nally internship program. This is vital, and of course, the Bronx River Alliance does similar kinds of things. Let's talk about interns and what not only does it do for them, but what does it do for the park, for Wave Hill?
Well, for the park, it provides a tremendous amount of support. But let's go back to this internship and the John Natty internship. And I'll go back to the High Line now. And
Okay.
a young woman there who was a gardener. And by the time I left the High Line, I had promoted her to become the deputy director of horticulture at the High Line. Where did she come from? Wave Hill.
Oh, my goodness.
Natty internship. And when she found out I was going to Wave Hill, she sat down and said, listen, that place is a horticultural mecca. It's my mecca. It got me to where I am today. And
So now you're really responsible, not only for the park, but to somebody personally.
There's a whole alumni of these interns across the country doing exceptional horticulture.
Wow.
So it is a resource, not just to our community.
And so I got
the board.
the stats here. It's 8 months of full-time stipend for world-class horticulture instruction.
Yep.
And now, are you enrolling them now? Is there a cycle?
We're about to finish one set shortly.
Oh, so then by maybe the end of the year, they're going to look again. Go to the website and you can, I think there's an education tab, and that's the way to do it. Volunteers, I saw the pictures of people pulling stuff out of the river. I remember they lifted a couple of cars out of the river at some point. This goes way back when you were probably at Pratt and we were still covering the Bronx River. Talk a little bit about what interns and volunteers do for you.
Oh, absolutely. Volunteers are at the heart of the health of the river, right? And so we run incredible programming all summer long. We have pitch-ins, we have gardening Tuesdays. You can get in where you fit in, whatever you like to do. We have an incredible coastal cleanup that we celebrate, where we, are part of an international movement, right, to clean waterways. I think that if the first 20 years of the organization was about cleaning the river, right? The next 20 are about enhancing that access for that permanent stewardship, so everybody can really experience it.
That's fascinating to me. So the 20 years of cleaning it, and now you feel like you've stabilized that to some degree, of course.
There's no limit to the work that can be done in an urban river.
But then the second part is access. Are there big infrastructure projects that you say, you know what, now we're going to do this, that kind of thing? Go ahead, dream here, we dream.
Well,
BronxNet, we dream.
We have created, right, more than 23 acres of parks and improved 26 along the Greenway, right? And we just completed this 20-year dream of Starlight too. So it's about creating connections, and it's also about being innovative in the programming. I talked about the foodway. We've expanded our educational programming as well to have a high school internship so that the outdoor classroom can be even more fully enjoyed.
I have to say, for our high school students, for Bronx students, and we hear this all the time, how many of them even knew that, so they've seen the river. You can see some of the education activities, but how many of them have been to the river? How many of them, we could talk also about the flotilla. That's another huge activity.
Yes.
And then you're really opening people's minds up. That's what it's about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I want to ask you. We'll ask you both this question. I'm going to lump two very terrible things together.
It's okay.
The pandemic and climate change.
Absolutely.
Did the pandemic affect what you do? Did it create a more imperative, so to speak? I'm sure people went walking through Wave Hill during the pandemic. And then the second part is, are you concerned about the shorelines? And what do you have to deal with when it comes to climate change? Let's do the pandemic first.
Okay, sure. I think no one, right, was not affected by the pandemic, and even more so, right, in low-income communities of color, right, that have, a desperate need to be outside the home and to get that piece of relief, right, at a time when...
I know that Mr. Oladapo-Johnson is sitting at the edge of his seat when he hears these words. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so I just think that usage went right up, and the need for it became, even clearer, right? Its connection to our vitality as a people. And at the same time, right, then as now, budget cuts, right?
So now you're feeling the effects of
exactly.
Yeah. I know for my wife and myself, that's all we did was walk through parks, Wave Hill and others. Was there a challenge through the pandemic, or do you just, the land is the land and you move on?
Oh no, it was definitely a challenge. But the important thing, I think, is you know, urban parks to a certain degree, pre-pandemic, was seen passively.
Yeah.
It's green space. I can go there when I want. During the pandemic and even post-pandemic, the understanding of how essential urban green space is to the infrastructure of urban areas
And urban life.
urban life has now become clearly understood in an undeniable way, and definitely has increased, usage, which in turn operationally increases demand on how we maintain these spaces, and so on and so forth.
What Ms. Conte referred to, I'm sure you consider as well, is, well, wait a minute, now they're cutting back, yet this is the time we need more funding because we have more interest in
Absolutely.
parks and in fresh air than ever
Absolutely.
before.
Absolutely.
And which brings me to another question. You work on grants, you work on donations, you work, or it's a combination of everything and everywhere that you can get funding?
Everything and everywhere.
Yeah, so all of the above. Let's just talk about climate change. You're on the river. It's a little bit different than the situation of the Bronx River Alliance. Does it affect the work at all? Does it make it more difficult? It's hotter, so it's harder to keep things green. You tell me.
It's essential. Forward-looking, we really have to think about how, our climate, both locally and globally, is shifting, and begin to pivot and position ourselves. Look back 2 weeks of what happened in this city when we had,
A torrential rain.
monsoon-style rainstorm.
And what did that mean for Wave Hill?
Well, we closed our park.
Closed the park.
Yes.
Which is unfortunate and makes you unhappy.
Absolutely.
Sure.
But, fortunately, we don't have that much unpaved, areas. So we were able to absorb everything.
Literally absorb it.
Yeah.
Other areas were not so fortunate as we saw.
That's interesting. Let's just talk about your concerns
For climate
the
change?
river.
Well, the extreme weather is a huge issue.
Was there flooding that was unfortunate?
There was, yeah. At Shoelace, at different points, right? We saw terrible impacts from that. But it's not just the flooding, right? It's not just the coastal protection, and you can do things to restore the shoreline so that it's more absorbent, like you're talking about. But it's also, right, all of that water running off, right, impervious surfaces, right, in these, honestly, levels of storms that we haven't seen, right? And that causes overflow.
Is there walls or other things that can be done, infrastructure things? These are going to cost money. We'd like to think somebody's going to react to that request.
Yeah, I think that there's a variety of things. The natural interventions are always the best ones. It's also really important to be active at the policy level. So I think the thing that's incredible about the Bronx River Alliance is that it also has advocacy teams, right, that are fighting, right, to have higher standards so we don't have as much runoff, right? So that the river stays cleaner and all of the above.
To the metal.
Yeah.
Listen, I got to ask you about the flotilla.
Okay.
I don't know, we got a picture here of a zillion people.
A zillion people. It was just last year. I think it was maybe just my enthusiasm, right? So this is our annual event, right? Okay. It happens every year in May. It is an opportunity to paddle down the river from Shoelace down to Starlight Park. There's nothing like it, and it's a major fundraiser for us, quite frankly. This is what enables the free programming, right, that we do all year long.
I think what's amazing, one of the many amazing things about both of these organizations, people will know the Bronx River. Maybe they read in the news, maybe they don't live right on the Bronx River, so they know about Concrete Plant and they know about some of the other things in the South Bronx. But you go all the way up to Wakefield, and that's still the same river. And, some of the underpass, let's say at Allerton Avenue, all that. And then, of course, you talk about the Bronx Zoo. I think for a lot of people, that's eye-opening. That this is real. I said the vein that runs through our home.
Absolutely, 23 miles long.
20. I didn't even realize
all the way up.
It was that long. Let's just conclude here with activities. Now, you've got it. You think about the park in the summer, in the spring, even the autumn, which is maybe the most beautiful time. But you have a winter program coming up.
We do,
ladies and gentlemen. The winter haven, they call it at Wave Hill.
Yes, and we hope to, really create let's just say, cozy space for our community.
I think we have some nice snow. Some snow pictures.
To come and enjoy. There will be, Family Thursdays where we open a little later. It's free. family welcome to come. We have, Friday date nights. We have wreath making. We have forest bathing.
Is there a time that it starts, like on this day it starts, or is it one of those things
the
that
first
just...
weekend of December.
Say it again?
The first weekend of December.
First weekend of
And it
December.
goes on towards the end of the year.
I'll tell you, there was one thing I read about. Pajama night?
Yes, there's pajama night.
Come to the park in your pajamas.
Yeah, for our kids, absolutely, and
For
for
the
our community.
kids, I'm sure they love it. And then what's next for you folks?
In terms of immediate programming, October
Whatever you want us to
21,
know.
Shoelace Park, November 4, community banquet. If you want to learn more about the Greenway that I mentioned, that's at Starlight Park. But we are continuing to work to restore and preserve and innovate around the river and connecting people to it. So,
And the advocacy never stops. For people who want to learn more about the Bronx River, who do they contact? What are they doing?
sure. BronxRiver.org has a full listing of all of our events coming up and incredible information about the river. It's a treasure trove. And you can email us, info@bronxriver.org.
And for you, let's see. So we've got the Winter Haven coming up. Large projects that we need to know about at Wave Hill?
We have several initiatives coming. I think the most important thing is our access, working on creating more access to our gardens across the board.
You haven't said that enough tonight. I mean, it's really important to you.
It's important, yeah.
And what does that mean?
That means that you can, it's a historic space. So when it was built, all that time ago, certain things weren't taken into consideration, making sure everybody could go anywhere they wanted within that space. I mean, it's a beautiful space. It does have, stairs and what so, but making sure that if you're unable to climb stairs, you can still go to parts of our garden that are beautiful, peaceful, and offer respite. So I think that's going to be our main drive going forward.
About how many, we saw the big flotilla population there, but how many people attend activities? Do you know the number? I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, it's fine. It depends on the activity. We had Samara Joy, Bronx native, playing this summer. We had 400 people one evening, sitting there enjoying fantastic music and performance. And on average, we'll look at maybe 300 people a day, depending on
300 a day.
Again, depending on the weather.
Well, of course,
It's a rainy day.
I realize that.
No one's showing up.
Well, I understand that.
Yeah.
300 people a day.
Which is, reasonable compared to other urban parks.
And for people who haven't been to Wave Hill, you can just show up and walk through the park, right?
Yes, you can. Show up at the gate. There's an admission fee.
Okay, great. And for you, do you sit by the river and daydream sometimes?
I do. So
Do you really?
I actually do because
I was just guessing. We're almost out of time. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So
No,
tell us.
our
What
headquarters
part-
is at
where
River
are the
House. We're in
23
Starlight
miles?
Park, River House, which is a
Okay.
building that we advocated for as part of our incredible partnership with the New York City Parks Department. So who else gets to work at a park and just gaze out there? Yeah.
Just wonderful to have both of you. Thank you for helping BronxNet celebrate 30 years. You've been around as long as we have, although the two of you just started in those organizations. We got to go. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much,
Thank you.
Gary.
Elena
I'm
I'm
Conte
getting my
and,
pajamas for
Good.
pajama night.
We thank our producer, Rebecca Hemick, the director, Will Guzman, the cast of thousands who work with us here in the studio. Next week, we'll do our final legacy program to help us celebrate 30 years of BronxNet, and that will feature Bronx artists. A longtime Bronx landscape painter and a Bronx photographer will join us. So if the curtain don't fall and the creek don't rise, we'll see you next week.